It's my pleasure to introduce Nir Tadmor. Nir is the Nir is the Director of Education of Impulse, an integrative clinic. He's also the co-founder of Safe Hearts, the organization that provides support for the survivors of 7 October. Also co-founder of Safe Shores, psychedelic emergency service in Partins. He's also a good friend and a dear human being. And it's a pleasure to be here with you, Nir. We know that there are topics in the psychedelic field that are triggering, topics that are very triggering, and topics that are extremely triggering. So in the heart of supporting each other, if any of you feels triggered during the session, we have created a room, a quiet place out of here, which Rosalind Watts is running. So if any of you needs anything during the session, please raise your hand, and we have Dan over here and Kato over there that will be happy to support you. That said, Nir, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Important. Hello. I am really, really honored and excited to be here today. And it is not easy for me, to say the least, to stand here and talk about such a painful event, 8 months to the day from when it happened, actually. While still horrendous things are taking place in the war in Gaza and in Israel. And during the talk you're going to hear today, I'm going to focus on a very specific group of survivors on one side of the fence. And I invite you to remember or to listen to this talk while remembering I'm coming here as a mental health professional and also as someone who is deeply rooted in psytrance culture and in the community that was hurt that day. But in no way am I here to represent any side of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That being said, I do want to voice a call and a prayer for peace, for the return of the hostages, and for an immediate ceasefire. And, thank you. Thank you. I honestly think it's a very sad day for all of us to start a talk in a psychedelic conference like that. And I really wish that we will all, as humans, know better days. So as far as conflicts of interest, I'm a co-founder of Safe Heart, which I'll share a lot about with you today, and Director of Education at Impulse Integrative Clinical Center. So during the talk today, I'm going to share with you our response to this mass traumatic event that happened on October 7th. I'm going to share with you some preliminary research findings from a qualitative research project. I'm not going to get into the quantitative one. And the principles of psychedelic-informed therapy, and mostly their importance for the treatment of the survivors of the raves that were attacked. So, on the very first day of October 7th, 8 of us from the psychedelic and psytrance communities in Israel united forces together with all the resources of our shared organization to form Safe Heart, which thanks to an incredible amount of effort from our therapeutic team, our therapeutic coordination team, our supervisory team, our research teams. Safe Heart is today a national resilience center, and we provide free of charge mental health support for all the survivors that attended one of the events of the psychedelic community that day. And on the left, you can see the guy who didn't get the pants memo. That's me. And on my side, you can see On my left, Guy Simon, who is the clinical director at Impulse and the chairman of the clinical operations at SafeHeart. And on my right, you can see Dr. Damien Halperin, who is the head of psychiatric support at both SafeHeart and Impulse. So everything I'm going to share with you today is really stemming from our daily mutual collaboration. Of course, needless to say, not in this picture, there's like hundreds of clinicians that are working really day and night to provide support for thousands of people that went through the most horrendous event. So on the very first day of the attack, we already had a file online with psychedelic-friendly therapists that were willing to provide free of charge 3 sessions for the survivors. Obviously, we realized that the survivors would need much more than that, but this was our way to create an immediate response to this traumatic event. 2 days later, we had a website. Through this website, more than 3,000 survivors contacted us, not including their family and friends. And this huge amount of requests led to a collaboration with the Ministry of Health. And today, the first 36 sessions are fully funded by the government, as we're recognized as a National Resilience Center, and the rest are funded by the funds that we are raising. So during the last 8 months, SafeHeart has provided more than 10,000 hours of psychotherapy and psychiatric consultation for more than 3,000 survivors. We have more than 900 survivors in long-term psychotherapy, which means that they're finishing already the first 36 sessions that are funded by the government. More than 260 licensed clinicians signed a yearly contract with us, and 10 retreats were facilitated for more than 200 survivors. I was privileged enough to co-facilitate 3 of those retreats. And the events that our NGO provides free of charge support for are these events. I am well aware that these events are not taking place in a vacuum, but as you can see, in addition to the Nova Rave that I guess all of you know about, there were 2 additional events in the psychedelic community that day: the PsyDAC, which is a small psytrance party that suffered severe losses, and the preparation weekend for the Israeli burn event, which is called Midburn, with at least 1 woman murdered. So 2 things that are really important for me to emphasize are that all the people at the rave experienced a polar shift from a state of celebration and freedom to the realities of war, whether they used substances or not. And also that the attack started at sunrise, and which is the peak hour of raves, with many planning the peak of their psychedelic experience to that time. So before I share with you some preliminary results from our phenomenological study, 3 really, really important biases I want to mention here, and they're extremely important. So first, we have a survivorship bias with approximately 10% of the people not surviving this event, people that we will never know what their experience was like or how psychedelics affected their attempt to survive. And also we recognized during the interviews the participants sensed that everything I did was for the best, which of course everyone that survived this event feels like that from the obvious reasons. It was an extremely chaotic event. If you jump right, if you jump left, it can determine if you survive this event or not. And then this perception that everything I did was for the best obviously may impact their perception as to the role psychedelics played in their survival. There's also the volunteer bias, with the people who participated in our study potentially holding different views and experiences from the ones who didn't. Again, we should remember that many people suffered severely, mentally, emotionally, and could not participate in any scientific study afterwards. And of course, the recall bias, where experiences of participants may be affected or distorted by time, by the traumatic event, and by the substances that they consumed. So, Guy here is leading a phenomenological study, which I'm a co-researcher in as well. And together we're exploring the lived experience of surviving a terror attack while in a non-ordinary state, and the impact different substances had on a sense of agency, decision-making, dissociation, and development of PTSD symptoms. And we're now at the end of a series of 50 in-depth interviews, and I will share with you 2 close-ended questions that we asked during those phenomenological interviews after a quick analysis of like 28 responses to these close-ended questions. As you can see, substances people used during this event were LSD, ecstasy, MDMA, ketamine, San Pedro, psilocybin mushrooms, mescaline, and MMC 3 or 4, with about half of the participants we interviewed taking LSD during this event. Yeah. So the first close-ended question that we asked was, do you think the substance or substances you took helped you save yourself or others, or did it hurt your ability to do so? Okay. And as you can see, 71.4 said, yes, it did support me in saving myself or others. And a quarter of participants said it didn't affect my ability to save myself or others. And 1 said, I don't know. Second close-ended question is, do you feel the substance or substances you took helped you cope with fear, terror, and helplessness, or did it hurt your ability to do so? 78.6% said, yes, it helped me, and 21.4% said, no, it made it worse. Okay, so obviously these findings were extremely surprising for us, and this is, again, before an in-depth analysis. It's before thematic analysis. It's just 2 close-ended questions that we asked, but yeah. So on the next slide, I'm going to share with you an example from our phenomenological interviews. This is as gentle as I could find. It contains no graphic descriptions, but it was important for me to bring a small, tiny taste of the lived experience of going through a traumatic event during the effect of a psychedelic. So I'm inviting you to take a minute to read the quote in the next slide silently. So how, yeah, I'm sure it's not easy to read that, but we'll continue. So as you could see, as you could read in this quote, in addition to some insights we got after reading the transcripts of the interviews, we found a few preliminary themes about how the substances supported the survivors. Okay, so this is what we found for now. Focus on the escape, dissociation from the events around, which is naturally supportive in this kind of context, a sense of following one's intuition, sense of agency, heightened sensory perception, ability to run longer and faster, and a deep sense of things going to turn out okay. In addition to that, something that we heard from numerous participants is that as soon as they realized that there is a traumatic event taking place, that there is an attack, that they need to save themselves, the effects of the substances that they took wore off. But once they got back home to a safe environment, they felt the effects fully blown again, which kind of leads us to speculate that it might be the effect of the adrenaline that kicks in that somehow postpones the effects of the substance for a while, or it just shuts it off just for a while so you can function. Naturally, that's still a speculation, but we heard it from numerous participants that they didn't feel the effect so strong once they realized something is going on, and once they were sitting on their couch back home, they could feel it again. And of course, I want to express my deep, deep gratitude for these participants, for these survivors, for sharing with us their delicate and sometimes severely traumatic experiences. So early on, we realized that we need to create an ethical and psychoeducational framework for the clinicians that are going to work with the survivors. Naturally, many of them, most of them, use the substance during the event, and most of them use substances during their everyday life before and after this event. And we defined 4 main pillars for this ethical framework, which we called psychedelic informed therapy. So one is harm reduction and psychedelic education, one is trauma informed therapy, one is set and setting, and compassion and loving presence. So I will start by the trauma-informed therapy part, and I'll say that in the context of Safe Heart, since we're working together with the Ministry of Health and we need to stand in their regulations, all of our clinicians have clinical master's degree and a certification in CBT, either CBT, DBT, somatic experiencing, EMDR, or CFAR CBT. Now, of course, we see this framework as valid for any clinician that works with people who are using psychedelics, whether it's related to this event or not. In the specific context of this event, I would say that another really important role psychedelic-informed therapy is playing in the context of trauma-informed therapy for the survivors is the fact that by providing psychedelic-informed therapy, our clinicians can support the survivors in regulating this hypervigilance that they're experiencing, as all of us or most of us know very well, as a PTSD symptom. What do I mean? I mean that when a client who is hypervigilant is entering a clinic, naturally there is this hypervigilance is directed towards the nuances of the facial expressions, the intonation, the body language of the therapist, and by the therapist providing psychedelic-informed therapy, we're actually supporting a sense of safety and the quality of the therapeutic alliance, and naturally our core issue here is treating the trauma that took place. So in a sense, by providing psychedelic-informed therapy, we can also put the psychedelics aside and focus on what's really important now. So what are the core competencies of a psychedelic-informed therapist? So one is to hold an open, non-judgmental, and compassionate stance towards the motives, hopes, patterns, and fears the client has with regards to psychedelics. The therapist should be able to support the client during preparation and integration on one hand, and should be able to advise when and why it is not the right time to use psychedelics on the other, something that is, of course, very important when you work with people who had a severe traumatic experience and are still using psychedelics. The therapist should also study the risks, effects, and basic science related to each substance the client uses, and should be aware of the crucial role set and setting play in determining the nature of the client's experience during both the psychedelic experience and the integration process. Another really important part of the support we offer from Safe Heart is our retreats, our communal healing journeys. And here in this picture, you can see the amazing group of survivors that joined our first retreat On the bottom right, you can see Igor Tartakovsky, who is leading SafeSure, the psychedelic harm reduction project with me, and who is also the head of group support, group processes at SafeHeart. And I really cannot describe to you how meaningful it was for us during those days to sit together, to sing together, to play music, to eat together, to practice yoga, and to just support each other in connecting to our inner resources that all of us needed so much during these times. And not long ago, someone asked me if I think that if this event, if this attack would take place on a rock concert, for example, if the response would be similar. And I said that I don't think so, because I think that psytrance is more than a musical genre. It's a culture. It's a culture where we experience week-long journeys together, where we go through profound spiritual experiences together, and where many of us feel a sense of belonging to a community with shared values. And these values are largely stemming from the experiences that the substances, the plants that we're here to study are enabling. Peace, love, unity, and respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nir. Well, this was very impressive talk. I need some time to take a breath, and I see one hand here. I have one short time for a question because we have a next talk, but I also want to take the time to, well, think about what we just talked about. So, one brief question.
Should I? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for coming here and doing this talk. I would also like to express my condolences to all the survivors and families of the civilians sacrificed on the altar of blind violence. I pray that they heal and they change the world for the best. For context, in the Netherlands here, I've noticed two kinds of trauma related to this. There's first the trauma that comes, psychological trauma that comes from witnessing the life killing of 35,000 Palestinians on our screens and being unable to do anything about it. And then there is the very physical trauma of getting beaten up by the police whenever we raised our voice to try to change the violence of the status quo. So my question to you is, since your talk is titled Psychedelics on the Terror, I was wondering if you could expand also on psychedelics under genocide, and if you can see any way in which psychedelics can be maybe used in a critical material way against oppression of Palestinian people, since oppression and terror are two sides of the same coin, and to make sure that we're working on both sides, working for peace, for justice, so that the 7th of October never happens again.
Comment. No, I think I'm just not going to comment, so yeah, thank you.